Hello. So today's musing fits with the theme of looking at your individual circumstances, wanting to shift them, or wanting to at least feel like you can handle being in them and give yourself greater context, greater ease, greater autonomy. So if you find yourself in a situation, feeling, experience, maybe you wake up and you just don't feel right or you don't feel great. You're just not feeling as you expect, or maybe it's an entire season. You felt like this for weeks or months, even. And you feel as though things could feel better, or you're a little lost in the sauce. You're feeling a little lost in your context, or you're feeling as though the experiences you're having feel pointless or repetitive or on a loop. Um, and you want to feel as though you're still driving the car, you're still part of the creative aspect of the experience. What we want to do is feel into being bigger than the experience in the present moment. So let's say you get to notice this experience, this moment. You get to take this moment to feel it fully. So be in your body, feel it. Feel the sensations that are coming up for you. Feel where it is in your body. Put your hand there if you can. Start to look at the quality, not go into the mind about it, but feel the feeling and feel the quality of the feeling. Feel the color, the texture, the speed, the pace, the tempo, whatever qualities you can give to it. We're pulling ourselves out of the mind. We're pulling ourselves out of the storyline for a second, and we're just feeling the feeling that is taking place. So this morning, this came to me because I had what felt like a knot in my stomach. And I remember, oh, I've been here before. Oh, I've dissolved it. And the mind wanted to go into, well, why is it coming back? Well, why is it here again? What is it attached to? The mind wanted to take the lead and tell the stories. But the place I was coming from in taking the lead and telling the stories was more like it's giving hijack. It's giving a little bit of panicked need for a story. So whenever I'm feeling panicked and mentally paired with that panic, or whenever I'm feeling like ego control, I've identified it now. I know what it is when my ego is stepping in and sort of attempting to take the wheel, but in attempting to take the wheel and wanting control, it also sort of um, looks at things in a complainy way, or it looks at things in worst case scenario or doomsday. Like there are aspects to that ego that tend to um, volley for control. And then once it has the attention, the control, and seems to be in charge of the narrative, it then attempts to shape what it sees, but not from a very empowering place, which is why I like to sort of pattern interrupt this experience. I like to see that the ego is the one driving the car, holding the narrative, attempting to make its meaning because it's grown in complexity. It has access to knowledge, but it's not necessarily versed in wisdom. It's not necessarily coming from that wisdom higher perspective place. It can grope at and grasp at and piece together things, but the agenda, I suppose, that the ego carries, the agenda for um, less expansion, less integration of wisdom, less acceptance of what's here. It's sort of like get it out of here as quick as possible or deal with it as quick as possible. The ego is sort of like the shoddy job of it, like. So for me, I like to interrupt that and go back into the feeling, come out of the mind, come back into the body. And from there, I can feel the heart. The heart is closer. And so I trust that my heart can do the shifting of the energy for me. I trust that my heart breaks up the density because I've done this so many times before in the body where I've felt the feelings. Now, sometimes I forget I have access to this. And it's about slowing down and remembering this function, remembering that this is how you were meant to function. This is how you're meant to move things through. It's how you were meant to metabolize. Just like we metabolize food without having to think about it, we can metabolize energy and emotions and I think sometimes the ego gets in the way and interrupts that pattern, or there's something that needs our attention and we need to really just be there and accept it and allow it. There's something that needs acceptance. So for me, I had to look at this knot and not jump into, I've already dissolved this before. Why is this coming back? Why is this here again? Am I not fully healed? And then the ego wants to create all these doubtful sort of stories about, well, see, the healing didn't work. But that's like saying, see, you didn't digest that food once and for all, and now you now you never have to eat again, or you're never going to experience eating, and you're never going to experience digesting. It doesn't make sense. We're going to keep experiencing emotions. We're going to keep experiencing thoughts. We're going to keep experiencing experience, right? There's no sort of neat and tidy way to say, I want to be a human and I want to be done with the experience of being a human at the same time, which for my efficiency brain was like, oh, this is a use of energy. How can this become more efficient? Without, like, hilariously, I'm laughing as I'm saying this, without just cutting off the process and being divorced from the process and then being like, oh, right, wait, that's why we're here. That's why we're living. We're having this experience. This is part and parcel of it. So let's recount. You wake up, you have a feeling. You're going through an experience, you have a feeling. You have something come up in your body, or you have an overwhelming feeling, or you notice your mind's racing. And if your mind is racing again, come to the body. There's something in the body for you. So you come back to the body, you feel the feelings, you attribute the qualities, you really be with it, you accept it for just the time being. This is allowed. This is okay. This is not a problem. We can't problematize something that's already here, because that's attempting to put it under the rug, and that doesn't make sense. We're not necessarily attaching to the narrative, ruminating in it and saying, this is my forever life and forever home. I stay here, but we're going to be able to feel the feelings, right? We feel the feelings, we look at the quality, we really immerse in the feelings. So we detach from that ego perspective because we learn to settle in. It's like getting in a hot bath or a cold bath, and we're acclimatizing. We settle in, we see what's here, we see it's here. And we remember that just because we're accepting it and seeing what's here in the moment does not mean we're saying stay forever. Does not mean that we'll be here forever. We're just simply feeling it. We use our hands to touch it. We use our whole body to sort of bring it into the forefront, amplify it, make it a little louder. Let's get clear on it. Let's get really clear on it. Let's let it have its moment in the spotlight, in the glory, all the while knowing that we get efficient at this process, just like we get efficient at metabolizing, just as we always can anticipate change. This is not where we're staying. So there's no need to worry about being here and letting it fully show itself. So you let it fully show itself, you let it come into the forefront, you fully feel this feeling. And in this moment of total acceptance and feeling, you start to feel a shift in it. You ramp that intensity right up. It can't last. It can't last. You allow the intensity to get so big. Every storm runs out of rain, right? Remember this. It gets big. You feel it. And eventually you will feel a shift, that it is safe for you to come back to both heart and mind. You know your heart is doing the alchemizing for you. You know your body naturally is meant to process emotions. It's actually not meant to clench around them. It's not meant to be like an alarm button that gets pressed down and stuck. It's not meant to be in a contracted state while everything else is flowing. We're meant to flow in wholeness, right? Not have segregated parts holding on to emotions that we can't handle. I mean, for the short term, yeah, you might have to put something to the side, but for the most part, we're meant to allow things to flow through and keep moving and keep going. So we sit there, we give it our attention, we give it our acceptance, we give it our allowance, we allow this feeling to be in our body, and we don't try and lobotomize it. We don't try and usher it along. We don't try and tell it it's not supposed to be here. Like, what the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be having a beautiful life, never with this. So we let it be there. We look at it. We treat it like a scared child. This is, we can use inner child work and we can think about it like inner child work. We treat it like we've recognized we're home, and there's this child sitting on the floor of our living room, and it's feeling the feeling you're feeling: sad, contracted, frustrated, angry, whatever it is. And we're not going to say, get out of here. We're going to say, You're welcome here. And you just be there with it. And you just be this gentle awareness, this gentle observer, as people call it, this loving awareness, this loving presence, whatever works for you. Pick the best phrase, pick the best feeling, pick an archetype, pick a sensation, pick a blanket, whatever you need to do to relax into allowing this to spread out and just be. And you allow it to be. And then there becomes this shift where you're in the midst of fully feeling it to being aware of it being here and being a feeling. And in this moment, you get to notice and expand yourself into your context and into your perspective. In this moment, you become bigger than the sensation, you become bigger than the thing, and you remember you are bigger than the thing. So, first, you have to zoom into it. You have to allow it to sort of break up and dissolve the density to unlock. You're basically allowing the knot to start to loosen so you can see the strings and you can see that there's space in between them. You start to flood source, God, yourself, higher self, whatever you feel, the bigger part of you in between the spaces of it. It is no longer contracted and protected and ignored. It is now being infused with you, and it starts to dissolve as you. This thing that thinks it is you, this thing that you think is you, this thing that you were over identified with, this thing that you felt trapped inside gets to start to be relieved by you, and you realize you're not trapped inside it, and you realize it's not permanent, and you realize it's a passing thing, and you realize it needed your attention. And the moment you switch that gentle observer, you're expanded enough to hear your intuition. And your intuition might lead you to some things. Like today, as I said, I felt this experience. And in the beginning, it was like, what is this? It's so tight. It's so dense. I can feel it. It's above my solar plexus. It's above my solar plexus. It's under my heart. It's this tight knot. What is it? It's a combination of frustration, regret, resentment. Okay. And it starts coming easily. And then you might notice the mind and the ego want to, okay, yeah, we're taking part in this. And you just gently remind yourself, your heart has this process. You don't need to jump ahead. And you can allow the revelation, you can allow the intuitive epiphanies, the intuitive whole thoughts to come in. This is not the rushed process of the ego. This is not the fear-based process of the ego. This is not the limited self. This is the revelation of wisdom. And you start to see, okay, well, what's this frustration from? And how is this showing me something? And what can I do with this? And if there's nothing yet, it's just feel it. Just feel it and allow it through. Fantastic. Because you know that once it moves through, there's also clarity. There's also a different perspective. Once a shift takes place, when you're on the other side of it, you have a different outlook on it. And the ego might come in and be like, but we're here doing this again. And again, care for that ego, because you're getting to see how in the first place, this thing could have been sort of hidden in your blind spot. It could have been in your shadows. So you elevate, you expand, you create space in this thing. You feel physical changes and sensations in your body. You might feel the density start to dissipate. I always feel it float up into my heart. And I know that my heart is such a powerful processor. My heart knows how to take that, and my heart knows how to turn it into grief or to have sadness happen. My heart knows how to convert it into laughter. So if it's like sadness necessarily, if it's something that my heart is going to grieve over and it needs to just be grieved as it's let go, eventually I will maybe cry or I'll feel sadness. It'll go from this densely packed physical pain or physical sensation to a more lighter feeling that is clear, that I can discern what it is, and then it can pass through a little easier. It's like there's an allowance for it to pass through. Like the heart is just such a strong place for it to dissipate and dissolve and burn up. Like that's the furnace for the emotions. Just like our gastrointestinal system is the metabolizing center, it's the metabolizing area. The heart is the metabolizing area for emotions and feelings and experiences that are hard to digest. So from there, you get to reframe it. You get to create the perspective for it. So for me, I liken when I go into deeper places and I go into deeper expressions of my shadow and I start to look at stuff and when I go in there, sometimes I can feel like I go under and I forget the version of me that's in the sun almost. And not always, but I sometimes get this experience. But I've become quite adept at going into my shadow and going into these experiences. And I get to reframe it. So when I notice I'm in deep waters and when I notice it feels a little uh, dark or it's hard to see or I feel like I'm just sort of in the waves and I'm in deep reflection, I can remember and I can give myself visionary experiences. I can give myself symbolism for this. So I could say, you know, well, I'm swimming in these deep waters and I became a mermaid. So I became so proficient at it. I transformed, I adapted to my circumstance because it's an empowering way to look at the deep waters and not to feel like you're sucked in the undertow. You have no idea what you're doing. So my perspective is that I became a mermaid and I adapted. And then I understand that with adaptation comes evolution and change. So it's never a static process. I'm not like locked in the depths of the water for the rest of my life. Again, it's remembering I expand bigger than the context. So it could be I expand bigger than the feeling sensation emotion in that specific moment, or I notice that there's been a pattern that I've been deep diving for a while and I remember this is a season, this is a quarter, um, this is an experience of that's in a sequence so that I don't just stay there. And then I look at the fact that I've already adapted. Wow, I went from discovering and becoming aware that I'm here or knowing I'm here and then sort of going about life and then remembering I'm still here. And this was big for me when I realized that I could re-perspectivize how I looked at seasonal affective disorder and depression. I could use those times as hibernation and I could use those deep dives and really look at them for what they were. And I could bring awareness to, oh, okay, I'm in this time of deep discovery, deep hibernation. I don't feel the impulse to go fast. I don't feel the impulse to go out and do 100 million things. I feel the impulse to really come inside. I don't feel like I have the energy for this, that, or the other thing. I feel like I have the energy to deep dive and explore. And while I know that I'm ultimately architecting and designing my experience, I know this is also a co creation. So I don't always have full control over the timing of how long it lasts. Just like when you're processing grief, you don't just get to snap your fingers and decide, I'm done grieving this, I'm done. It might get to a point where you initiate that because perhaps you've been doing it for quite some time. You realize, oh, I've been grieving for so long. I need to get back into the sun. Like I need to dry my wings off, so to speak, and take flight again. I need to convert these mermaid scales into bird feathers, and I need to get myself back on land, dry off, and get ready to take flight again. So when we use this symbology and we use this imagery, for me at least, it gives an empowering context and it just gives me something to vision so I understand I'm still part of this cycle and that in a larger context, I am co-creating this, if not designing and architecting it, and I'm the one that can steer it. So I always continuously remember that there's these stages where I come into this and I come into my awareness and there's a discovery and there's a curiosity, and this might be characterized by trial and error, making mistakes, or feeling my way through and it not feeling comfortable yet. And then I usually go into the proficiency stage and then eventually the mastery stage. And in the mastery stage, it feels a whole lot easier to look around and say, what's next? That mastery stage is also like blowing out the context and feeling my higher self and feeling my intuition and knowing, okay, there is a stewarding aspect of me that is stewarding this entire experience. And so I can flow with it. I can flow with the evolution. I can know and trust that there is a flow and a current taking me, and I can know and trust that change is always happening. And for me, I like to look at the idea of the bleed through. So if I feel ever sort of stuck in the situation, I start to lean into, well, the bleed through of the next experience is already here because there's not a, a clear solid divider between experience. There's not a clear cut division between anything. We're all interconnected. This is, energetically, there's always going to be, just like smelling the barbecue down the street. Like there's no sharp distinction between. There is like a pixelated phase in, phase out. So if I'm ever feeling stuck, I can always remember I have access to this bleed through of what's next. I have access to smell what's on the airwaves. I have the ability to feel into what's coming down the pipeline. And for me, that reminds me that there is always change afoot. Actually, change is what's already happened. Actually, we're in flow and in motion all the time. Even when we're sleeping, even when we're resting, there is still a flow. And whether I relate to that being time or whether I relate to that just being the flow of being and living, it doesn't really matter, whatever feels good. So then from this place, I feel this transition and I honor the stages of it. And I frame this like this understanding of adaptation, evolution, flow, and change through cycles. And I honor the stages of discovery and curiosity, proficiency and mastery, right? And I ensure that I remember joy and play and lightheartedness, and that this is a game, and that this is a co-creation, and that I'm not on my own, and that when I actually remember, there are aspects that are both guiding me and hinting to me, and I am getting to choose. And then I allow it to continue evolving, and that all gives me space to expand out of the contracted state of the feeling. And in that process, I've looked at it and it becomes faster and it becomes easier and you become masterful at it. But I realize that through that process, one, I'm getting more proficient at metabolizing emotion. Two, I'm able to look what's going on inside my body and take the signals as they come. I'm effectively looking at the dashboard light on my car and addressing it. I'm not just putting tape over it. I can feel the feelings, right? And then what's great is that we become sensitized to our bodies again. We might feel like super sensitive when we start to do this, but it's because we're coming back online with our sensitivity to our bodies. We're inviting our living intelligence, our living, breathing intelligence that's like right here. That's not a static set of rules and rule book, but that's like here and interpreting and intuiting with us from moment to moment. That's what your intuition is. It's not separate from you. It's there for, it is you. It's your intuitive presence that helps you. And it's sort of like, which one are you aligned to? Are you aligned to the ego aspect that feels that gives the bravado of being in control, but ultimately feels weak by living here because it's meant to keep you safe, so it's sort of meant to worst case scenario and look out around every corner, um, knowing that you have a gentle guide that's beyond that, that's bigger than that. Like that would be the version that needs to be guided out of its fear. Yes, in a moment it can get you, out of a sticky situation, but how often is that occurring? So we want to unstick that button, that ego button, and we want to, as much as we can, elevate into the perspective that's gently guiding. And that means feeling into this intuition. It means resensitizing to your body and your body's awareness. It's a whole holistic communication system. It's a living intelligence. It's a luminous, living source intelligence that we connect to, that we have access to, that is who we are. And it will give us the information we need. But we can't just sort of like shut off a wing of that communication. Like, I don't want to hear what the body's giving me. I don't want to hear that feedback loop. Let's shut it off. Or I've ignored it so many times that I'm literally numb to it. I can't feel it. I can't feel the sensations in my body anymore. I'm numb. So I'm like missing all that intelligence, and it will do other things to reach me. It'll create scenarios, or it'll magnetize scenarios to like bust open what I'm not looking at. So that's how I feel into and do the somatic work and partner with my intuition, my living intelligence, my living luminous source intelligence, like this, the intelligence that is the highest. It's right here. It's the creative impulse. It's the source. It's, you get what I mean. I pair with that. I feel through the body. I let it guide me through feeling again and somatic processing. And this is where we can heal things that were going to get louder and louder and louder. This is where we can be with our body and our body gains trust. This is where we build self-love, self-acceptance, self-trust. This is the bones of it. This is the work. And we gain insights from this. And then once everything sort of quiets down, what's underneath starts to bubble up, and you'll have wisdom. It's like it's converts. This is the alchemy. This is what I'm talking about when I say everyday alchemy. It converts whatever was going on in a chaotic sort of swirling form into lived wisdom. So you start to gain the wisdom about why you felt that way, what's connected to it, what belief and story is it connected to, what habits is it connected to. You get to see a full spectrum. It's like a little orb, and you see it from like 100 different angles, and you see how it's connected to everything, and you get to transmute it. You get to release it. You get to relieve the wisdom from it and keep going and have that wisdom. You know that forever now. Like you don't undo wisdom. You know yourself more fully. You accept yourself more fully. This is a somatic work that helps your nervous system calm down and feel like I'm safe, I'm loved, and on an emotional energetic level, this being knows how to process. This being is safe here to process at higher levels. This being is safe to become more and more of the creator, the architect, the responder, not the reactor. And you might have this proficiency or even mastery in other areas of your life, but perhaps there's these little holdout areas where this feels too painful. This is too buried. Now, I can guarantee that's impacting the proficiency in the other areas. You may have mastery over the physical body and you go to work out, but I'll tell you, it's a holistic system. So even if we think it's not necessarily affecting us, those little sort of root, deep, unfinished business, so to speak, does have some sort of lingering effect inside. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful to know you can do this. It's wonderful to know we were meant for this. And this is what I was compelled to share today, given my own experience. So I work it. I work it every day. I look at it. I work my steps. I work my process. I work the alchemy. I lift the thing, but I don't go in. I know that lifting is what happens, but I don't go in with the ego and attempt to lift it and like rip it and pull it and weed it. I used to be like, let's go in this garden and let's rip all the weeds out. And I realized that that process was not honoring the messages. It was almost like that was giving you're not supposed to be here vibes, when it's like, but I was set up to give you this message. So technically, yes, I am supposed to be here and you're supposed to be paying attention to it and communicating with me as a whole. So this was the musing for today. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, reach out.